sometimes, well, all the time, I like to learn about different careers. And I know I've heard of this term a lot in this career, but I really want to know more. And today, Miss Perez, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So you are a social worker,
Yes.
right? We're going to talk about that because I'm sure a lot of folks out there, young adults, are interested in profession. I've heard some things, so I want you to clarify it, but let's go through them. How would you best define a social worker?
So I would define a social worker as someone who kind of bridges the gap for people when they need resources, somebody who's there to just essentially help people and connect them to community resources. I think that's the best way I would describe it in an easy way. It's just someone who helps the community and bridges them to the resources that they might need that they are unaware are available to them.
Okay. Give me an example. So let's try to paint this picture. Let's define it a little bit.
Okay, so for example, um, if you have lack of resources, you don't have any food or any shelter, a social worker would come in and connect you to food pantries or food banks and get you into some temporary housing while you're looking for a more permanent and stable plan.
Okay. Now, what made you go into this field?
So everyone always asks me this, but I feel like from a very young age, I knew I wanted to do social work. I just didn't know that social work existed or what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt some sort of responsibility for advocating for others, especially children in marginalized communities. My family growing up, we faced systemic barriers, so that helped me see the importance of having someone who not only listens but also fights for justice. So that's kind of what inspired me to pursue social work.
Okay. All right. No, that makes sense. So let's talk about your education. What you had to do to get to this point of being a an official social worker. Talking about your school, your kind of
Okay.
you went through, and things like that.
So I am actually a community college fan and stan. I always recommend the community college route to anybody, but for me, I just want that route to save some money. So I did 3 years at my local community college. I got an associate's degree in social and behavioral science because unfortunately at my community college, we didn't really have a social work path. There was one intro social work class that I remember taking, but before that, I didn't really have much experience in social work. I found social work in community college through taking sociology classes. At first, I was like, psychology, like, let's go. And then I took psychology classes and I was like, you know what? This is too much of this clinical one-on-one. Like, I can't do this. So that's where I discovered sociology. I took some sociology classes. I absolutely fell in love with it, but I knew I wanted to do more of like the helping portion of it. So that's where I found social work. So from my associate's degree in social behavioral sciences, I transferred to Cal State University Chico, which is in Northern California, which is where I pursued my bachelor's degree in social work. So I did 2 years there. I did have to apply into the social work program, so just be advised if you do plan on going into social work. Most schools will have you apply into their program and will require a little bit more background information of who you are and why you want to pursue a social work degree. More times than not, they also ask for some community service when you're applying into their programs. So I ended up getting into the social work program at Chico State, and I graduated in 2022 with my bachelor's degree in social work.
Awesome.
Yeah, so after I graduated, I had the decision of moving back to Southern California, which is where I'm originally from, or staying in Northern California. I did apply to grad school through Chico State for
Mhm.
their master's in social work before I graduated with my undergrad degree. Unfortunately, I didn't get into the program. It's a very competitive program. and it's a 1 year program. So at the time, they were only taking 20 students. So you can only imagine how competitive that is. And I didn't have any experience outside of my bachelor's degree. So I didn't get in. I was on the wait list, top five. So I will say I'm proud of being top five. But unfortunately, I had to make that decision and I ended up moving back to SoCal. Another thing that you should know about social work is that every program is going to require a practicum, which is some sort of internship, paid or unpaid. When I was in undergrad, I did my internship at a school district, and my school helped me find my internship. They sent me a list of internships that I could reach out to request to interview. And that's how I went about finding my internship at a school district, doing school-based services, connecting with the youth, facilitating groups, and just helping them get their priorities straight, a lot of grades and conflict resolution. Anyways, I ended up moving back to SoCal. I had secured my job in child welfare, and I found another passion, which was in child welfare. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I need to get my master's degree. I can't keep postponing this. So I took a year off, what people consider the gap year. And
Yeah.
then that's when I applied into a master's program. I got into the University of Kentucky, their 1 year advanced standing program. And in 2024 is when I graduated with my master's degree in social work.
Awesome.
You don't necessarily need a master's in social work to obtain a social work job. A lot of the positions actually in the county that I work in, they take, like if you're getting your associate's degree, some college units to do like entry level social work, but for more of like the practitioner and the more advanced work, they will require for a bachelor's.
Okay. So is an associate's degree, let me just go backwards. Is an associate's degree the minimum requirement, or is it a bachelor's, or does it vary?
I would say it would vary. I would say for the most part, it's a bachelor's degree, but what I wish I would have known is that I could have started going into the field of social work with an associate's degree or some college credits just to kind of start getting experience. But yeah, for the most part, it's a bachelor's.
Okay. Now you said psychology. How you diverted from that path, but isn't really psychology really built into your profession as a social worker in a
It
way?
it is, but it's in a different capacity.
Yeah.
Just because social work is more about advocating, about challenging social justice, and there's three different types of social work: micro, macro, and meso.
Hmm.
So right now I'm doing micro, which is more of like that one-on-one community, which is kind of like where psychology comes in play, but I think that they're very different. A lot of people who go into psychology want to be like a psychologist or a counselor. I too want to be a therapist, but having a social work foundation is a lot different than a psychology background.
Hmm. So, what kind of skills do you possess, and others should possess to be in this role? Because you have to be compassionate, right, and understanding tenfold. Right?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest skills is just being compassionate, like you said, and having empathy and just a listening ear, because a lot of times we listen, but we're not listening, or we just listen to respond. And when we meet with our clients, sometimes they're at their lowest or going through a crisis. So they're really looking for someone who can just listen to them and empathize with them. Because a lot of times, what I've seen is, we have our support systems, but it's not the same thing as somebody who is coming in, doesn't know anything about you, is not judging you. And that's where we're able to build that rapport and really help these families, because they have their supports, they have their family members, but a lot of the times they don't really know what's actually going on. So to me, it feels like a privilege knowing and being able to be there with them through one of the hardest times of their life. I would also say that another skill that you would want to have as a social worker is being a problem solver, being an advocate. We are oftentimes, like, you're trained how to do social work, but a lot of the times I'm catching myself looking up, okay, if they need one thing, I need to figure out how to get them there, what it is that they need, or all the
Give me an
different
example.
resources.
Give me an example of what you mean specifically. You just touched base on it, but problem solving. Just what comes to mind.
So the other day I had a client and he needed to do some DUI classes, and he can't afford them. So I was like going through every single website to try to find the cheapest option for him. So, I mean, typically here you find one for $980, and I'm like looking to see where can I find one that's even cheaper, or what can I do to assist him. And sure enough, I was able to find that they do a financial assessment that you might not have to pay this lump sum up front, but they might do a payment plan, things like that.
And I missed what you were searching for. What did he need with that? What was that?
DUI classes, driving under the influence.
That's what I thought you said. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm, yeah.
All right. Oh boy. All right. So, what were some of the classes that you took, courses that really you're like, wow, this is cool. Like you really resonated with that kept you going. Because there's some class that you take in school that you're like, nobody cares.
Yeah, so I feel like all the classes that I took really shaped me into the social worker that I am today. I'm really grateful that I was in a really great undergrad program that helped me build the social work foundation. One of my favorite classes, I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. But essentially, when you apply into a social work program, all your classes are social work based classes. I would say one of them, I'm pretty sure it was called being a change agent. And we were just talking, it was just pretty much about all like the injustices going on around in the world, and how it's our responsibility and to do the advocating. And it's especially in these climates, we have the National Associations of Social Workers, and there's a code of ethics that I
Mhm.
think a lot of the times that we forget. And I think that that class really rooted that in me, and it's always at the back of my mind. And I think, like I said, we forget about the code of ethics. So for me, if something is just not adding up, or someone is approaching something in a way that I think is not aligning with the code of ethics, I always like to bring it up and say, hey, like, did you forget like the code of ethics, or social worth, I mean, worth of a person, and dignity of a person. I'm always bringing that up because it's such a fundamental part of social work.
Right. What would you say though would be a violation or something to that effect when it concerns ethics?
um Breach of confidentiality is the big
Okay,
one.
good one.
Also is like challenging social justice. A lot of times, like, there's policies that we have to follow, but it's like sometimes the policies aren't advocating or challenging social justice. So even though we might not be able to change something, constantly bringing up the issue might result to policy change. Let me think of another one. Dignity and worth of a person. Like, you said, it sometimes we just have so many clients that you just become another person, another number. But we have to remember that each client, they are worth it, and we have to treat everyone with dignity and respect. So those are the two ones that I see are the biggest ones where people sometimes forget.
Sure. And I think it applies to all industries or many,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
So
right.
I'm guessing though in your space that sticking with the ethics, if you see something that is a little, uncertain or not right, you have to, I guess, report it, is lack of a better word, which maybe sometimes it's easier to turn the other way,
Right,
right?
right, right. Especially with like breaches of confidentiality and things like that. Like, they're not meaning it in like in harm's way, but essentially once you get your license or have a number associated to you, like, it does become more risky if you turned a blind eye to it, or if you're continuing to engage in those unethical behaviors.
Mm-hmm,
um
mm-hmm.
So yeah, like you said, it's sometimes easier to just, turn around and pretend like you're not seeing it, but that's not being a true and real social worker.
Hmm. This is good stuff because we know that people, as a young adult, late high school, early college, you can read about these professions and yours, right?
Hmm.
Read, but until you hear it from somebody like you, it paints a
Hmm.
different picture. Walk me
Right.
through your day to day activities, responsibilities, just generally speaking. What does that look
Hmm. So I am currently a social worker for the public defender's office here in my area.
like?
So I'm doing a different type of social work. I'm a lot newer to this scope of practice. I came from child welfare. So in the public defender's office, I work with juveniles in the juvenile unit, which are juveniles who are involved in the legal system,
Wow.
juveniles who are also absent, who have chronic absenteeism at school. So my position is funded through probation, and it's half juvenile, half public defenders, and half truancy. So when I'm doing juvenile stuff, public defender juvenile stuff, I'm getting referrals from attorneys, and they're the juvenile's public defender who's essentially trying to get them connected to some sort of service that they need. So on a day to day, depending what I have going on, like for example, today I have truancy stuff. So I know that my morning is gonna be filled with going to SARB meetings here at our local school district and trying to figure out what is the reason the children are missing school, if there's any barriers. We try to connect them to services. So that's where the social worker piece comes in. If they, need clothes for, if they need funding for clothes, hygiene, things like that, we can also help them with that. So today in my morning, I have that SARB meeting. In the afternoon, I'm going to be meeting with a client at one of our local stores to help them buy clothes to get them to school. So that was one of their barriers, is they don't have enough clothes. So we have allocated some funds to get them some clothes for school. So
Mm-hmm.
my evening, I'm gonna go shopping with the family, and then to finish up my day, I'm probably gonna be making some phone calls to try to figure out what additional services they might need. That's more of like the truancy stuff. I'm going to start meetings, getting them connected to services. We can do counseling services, food pantries, clothing vouchers, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
For the juvenile like delinquency stuff, it would just be getting them connected to community service. Sometimes the kids have to do community service as part of their conditions, or if they're on probation and they're needing a certain requirement, I help get them that certain requirement, whether that's like a drug and treatment inpatient treatment program or outpatient program, things like that, any classes that they might be needing. Also, we serve as a positive mentor and role model for these youth, just because they are our at-risk youth who
Mm-hmm.
sometimes come from, a unfortunate background, who unfortunately set them up to these disadvantages. So yeah, one of my favorite parts is just being a positive mentor for them and just trying to steer them in a better direction. And I think since I'm also young, I'm able to meet them at a different level and connect with them,
Sure.
and tell them like, you know what, like I know everyone is saying X, Y, and Z about you, but I don't think that. And let's just focus on moving forward and proving people wrong that this is not who you are. We all make mistakes, so I
Mm-hmm.
myself make mistakes. So obviously we need to address it, figure out what got you here, but let's figure out also how to move forward, also helping them look for jobs, just transitioning them back out if they are incarcerated. We also help with like litigation, doing biopsychosocials, just so that the judge knows exactly who this juvenile is, not just the charges. So we get their background information, who they are, who their parents are, what their upbringing was like, um, and just try to
Still
shape a
the liaison, right? I'm guessing
yeah.
between, the families and the system.
Hmm.
So how often do you deal with parents? I guess that, or guardian, right?
Um,
No.
You know, we do, but our clients are the juveniles. So we do work with the whole family. Like if the family needs therapy services and things like that, like we will most definitely get everybody connected. But
Right.
our client is the juvenile, so we pretty much work with them more one-on-one. Some parents are a little reluctant to, give us that one-on-one time. And they don't have to. It's not obligated that they do. And just random, my job through the public defenders is we are not mandated reporters. We are protected by client attorney. Is it client attorney privilege? Attorney client privilege. We work under the attorney's confidentiality, so we're not
Yeah.
mandated reporters. And sometimes these parents think that we're somehow tied to CFS or CPS,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
they're kind of scared to like leave
Yes.
us with their kids. But I always try to remind them, like, look, we're not here to get you guys involved in any other department. We're just here to help you guys. I think that for parents, I work with them more with my truancy work,
Mm.
because it's pretty much, you know, asking the parents, well, why isn't the child going to school, and what the parent needs in order to get these children to school.
So your day is not boring.
No, it's always different and it's
Yeah.
always something else. So we
But you
work
like that,
on,
right?
yeah, and I love social work for that reason. I don't like being glued to my desk. I love doing the field work. I love going to the schools. I love doing all the different stuff. We do a lot of outreach as well. Just last week we did a homeless, unhoused, I should say, event where a bunch of different departments came together, and we just, for the public defenders, we have a legal bus. So the bus offers legal services wherever it goes. So we were able to, do expungements, record clearings, things like that
Right.
on the spot, and also mitigate any arrests or anything like that. Just because sometimes law enforcement will show up, and sometimes these unhoused individuals have some legal or criminal history that they haven't taken care of. So we try to mitigate that and offer them on the spot legal aid and services.
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
A lot of negotiation going on, right?
Yeah.
What ages do you typically work with? I know you said juvenile, but what?
I think they typically start like around 12 years old.
Wow.
That's like young. But a majority is like around 15.
Hmm.
15 to 18, but we still work with them up until like they're 25. Here we have a local detention center where they can age out at age 25. They don't typically stay till they're 25 years old, but that's up until where we can work with them
That's
and
late.
transitioning. Yeah.
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 So when you go to schools or different entities or organizations, is there like, the social worker people are here?
Yeah,
You
so I'm seeing a shift, like a shift, because like I said, I came from child welfare,
Okay.
CPS. So when I would come in as a CPS social worker, they would kind of be like, "Oh gosh, they're
Yeah.
here again. Like we were not a fan of you guys." When most of our referrals are coming in from like school staff,
Hmm.
versus now it's the public defenders. A lot of people are confused and don't even know why a social worker in the public defender's office would exist. But I try to keep it really short with them because I don't want to breach any confidentiality, and I'm still new, so I don't want to say something that might get one of the attorneys in trouble or might breach, their confidentiality. So that's one of our biggest concerns is, it's better to just explain briefly, but don't go into any details. You don't have to disclose any information about your client because a lot of the times these clients are either on house arrest or were just recently released from detention center. So
But they have to let you in, right?
yeah, they do.
Jeez.
Yeah, so sometimes they give us a runaround, and I'm like, we can come in. Like, our we have to,
We have to, yeah. Oh goodness gracious, I like that. I like that role.
Yeah, yeah, I like it too.
Arch.
Yeah,
All right, listen, I'm not going to hold you up. You have a big, long, you have a busy day ahead of you. But
yeah.
last thing. So, what does your career path look like from this point on?
So I have a couple different options. Another reason why I came to the public defenders is because I have thought about law school.
Hmm.
So I might go into law school. It's not something that I have set in stone yet. I'm kind of just, getting my feet wet right here in the legal legal system and just the experience around being around attorneys and kind of picking their brain. So if I don't go into law school, 100% my goal is to get my LCSW, my license in clinical social work, to be able to have my own private practice and do
Ooh,
it and do individual therapy, group therapy, focusing on the youth. I have a big heart for the youth. But before I do that, I do have to do 3,000 hours, have to allocate 3,000 hours supervised to be able to test for my LCSW. So that would be coming in the near future. I would say maybe in the next 3 to 4 years, just because the
okay.
3,000 hours, it is a lot of time.
But
But
you
yeah,
have goals.
right, right,
Hey, I give you credit, right? We don't know each other that well. Got your associates, the bachelors, the masters. You're like a sponge. You're learning from the attorneys and all your field experiences, and you have goals. I like that,
right,
and
right,
you're doing something rewarding.
right.
No
Yes.
doubt, no doubt. Um, all right, so this is all good stuff, and I appreciate you doing this, Ms. Perez. You are a social worker, climbing that ladder of experience. I love it. Any
Right,
final
right.
thoughts that you want to share with us about your field?
I would just say for anybody that wants to be a social worker, we need you guys. I'm always telling everybody like social work is the way to go. A lot of people are so, there's a misconception that there's not money to be made in social work, but that's just
Yeah, I
simply
heard
not
that.
true. I would say so some disclose self-disclosure. My first year of social work with a bachelor's degree, I made around $75,000 and
Ah,
I live in California. Some people might not think it's a lot, but to me that's a lot for being fresh out of undergrad.
yeah.
And in my second year, this is without a master's as well, I made close to 80, 85. So there's definitely money to be made, especially once you get a master's and your license. I would also say that if you do want to go into social work, be ready to challenge challenge systems and social injustices and stay rooted in your why. Sometimes we forget why we went into this field, but
Mhm.
I always keep that with me and just practice self-care and never underestimate the power and the difference that you can make in somebody's life. And this job is so rewarding. Social work is a field that's going to continue growing. So if it's something that you've been thinking about, um, follow my TikTok. I do post social work
Okay,
content on my TikTok as well. I'll let you post
yeah,
my handle.
sure.
But yeah, that's what I
That's
would
good
share.
stuff. You explained that beautifully, and
Mhm.
and I appreciate you sharing the salary because I would never ask that. But
Yeah, I'm all
that's
about
great.
transparency. Yeah, so
Yeah,
obviously I'm gonna expect to keep making more and more money. But yeah, I people are like, oh, 40,000, a 40,000 year salary, and I'm like, no, that's just not true. Like I never saw that money. I saw that not even when I was working part-time. So
yeah, and I'm assuming though, depending on where one works, you can establish that pension.
yeah, and exactly. So I'm trying to get vested in. I need to do 2 more years to get some. I There's some catches. I'm still super
You got
young, but
time.
I need to inform myself on these pensions and stuff. But I've heard stay 5 years with the county, which is where I'm at. So I'm going on year three.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Miss Perez, I really do appreciate it. Again, you're a social worker. You're making strides in the society, helping others, and I do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
All right,
Stand
have
by,
a good
okay?
day. Okay.